some technical difficulties, so starting a little bit later. But we'll continue with our normal format. I'm sure none of y'all mind the delay, but if you can flip over to Genesis 31, just to start out with a reading without a lot of commentary, and then we'll have our praise time, and then have a lesson from the book of Luke, and then our prayer request time at the end like normal. So Genesis chapter 31. Again, I'm going to read this without saying a whole lot, but just to set it up a little bit. When you think about the story of Jacob and Laban, what normally comes to mind when I say Jacob and Laban? Rachel, yep, Leah, the trickery of thinking he was working all that time to gain the hand of one daughter, but then in the night, Laban gives him the other daughter, the one that Laban did not, or that Jacob did not truly love, and he had to work again to get Rachel. So, there's more history here. We're just reading sort of a portion of the story of Jacob and Laban. It's going to reference something about striped and spotted animals of the flock. And you need to go back to the chapter before, and you go back to chapter 30 to see what that was all about. So when I read that, it's not going to make a lot of sense, but go back and read on your own time. But this chapter really stands on its own in a way. It's just a neat little short narrative that don't read a lot, and I just thought it'd be valuable to read this little piece. There's more trickery in the story of Jacob and Laban, and even some other characters get involved. I say characters, we know biblical, historical figures get involved. So let's just read this, and then we'll move on to our praise time. Genesis 31, verse 1. Now Jacob heard that the sons of Laban were saying, Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from what was our father's he has gained all this wealth. And Jacob saw that Laban did not regard him with favor as before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your kindred, and I will be with you. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah into the field where his flock was, and said to them, I see that your father does not regard me with favor as he did before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times, but God did not permit him to harm me. If he said the spotted shall be your wages, then all the flock bore spotted. And if he said the striped shall be your wages, then all the flock bore striped. Thus God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. In the breeding season of the flock, I lifted up my eyes and saw in a dream that the goats had mated with the flock, that mated with the flock were striped, spotted, and mottled. Then the angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob, and I said, here I am. And he said, lift up your eyes and see, all the goats that mate with the flock are striped, spotted, and mottled, for I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and made a vow to me. Now arise, go out from this land, and return to the land of your kindred. Then Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, is there any portion or inheritance left to us in our father's house? Are we not regarded by him as foreigners? For he has sold us, and he has indeed devoured our money. All the wealth that God has taken away from our father belongs to us and to our children. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do. So Jacob arose and set his sons and his wives on camels. He drove away all of his livestock, all his property that he had gained, the livestock in his possession that he had acquired in Paddan Aram, to go to the land of Canaan to his father Isaac. Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel stole her father's household gods. And Jacob tricked Laban the Aramean by not telling him that he intended to flee. He fled with all that he had and arose and crossed the Euphrates and set his face toward the hill country of Gilead. When it was told Laban on the third day that Jacob had fled, he took his kinsmen with him and pursued him for 7 days and followed close after him into the hill country of Gilead. But God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream by night and said to him, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. And Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country, and Laban with his kinsmen pitched tents in the hill country of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, what have you done that you have tricked me and driven away my daughters like captives of the sword? Why did you flee secretly and trick me and did not tell me, so that I might have sent you away with mirth and songs, and with tambourine and lyre? And why did you not permit me to kiss my sons and my daughters farewell? Now you have done foolishly. It is in my power to do you harm. But the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. And now you have gone away because you long greatly for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods? Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid, for I thought that you would take your daughters from me by force. Anyone with whom you find your gods shall not live. In the presence of our kinsmen, point out what I have that is yours, and take it. Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. So Laban went into Jacob's tent, and into Leah's tent, and into the tent of the two female servants, but he did not find them. And he went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them in the camel's saddle and sat on them. Laban felt all about the tent, but did not find them. And she said to her father, let not my lord be angry, that I cannot rise before you, for the way of women is upon me. So he searched, but did not find the household gods. Then Jacob became angry and berated Laban. Jacob said to Laban, what is my offense? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? For you have felt through all my goods. What have you found of all your household goods? Set it here before my kinsmen and your kinsmen, that they may decide between us two. These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried, and I have not eaten the rams of your flock. What was torn by wild beasts I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it myself. From my hand you required it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There I was. By day the heat consumed me, and the cold by night, and by my sleep fled from my eyes. These 20 years I have been in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been on my side, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God saw my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you last night. They then come to some terms. Essentially, they set up a pillar as a witness to what has been done in the terms of this agreement. They swear on that. You get down to verse 55. It said, or 54, and Jacob offered a sacrifice in the hill country and called his kinsmen to eat bread. They ate bread and spent the night in the hill country. Early in the morning, Laban arose and kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned home. Just a really interesting narrative. Not the first thing you think of when you hear Jacob and Laban. I'm sure many of us are at least somewhat familiar with this. But Rachel getting in on the act. Jacob saying, whoever has your household gods, whoever has any of your stuff and you find it on them, they cannot live, they must die. So to think that, he could have pronounced judgment on his own wife, but she tricked him, said, sorry, Dad, I can't get up at the moment. So just interesting. I don't have any grand connections to make or personal application on this, but just thought I'd read through that this week and wanted to share that. All right, well, let's move on with our praise time. If you have any praise reports you want to give, maybe something we've prayed about before that you want to tell us an update of, raise your hand, make sure the mic gets to you, and Dylan will bring it to you. Praises, anybody? Now we've got a small crowd tonight, so Brandon.
I want to praise the Lord for my job's going really good. I'm thankful that it's going well, and I'm able to learn pretty well. I'm learning a lot. So job's going good. Praise the Lord for it.
Wonderful. Any other praise? Brother David normally has one.
Well, praise the Lord. January 26th, me and Miss Kathy will be married 50 years.
Whoa. Hey now. That's amazing. So 2 days. I noticed your wife didn't. Praise the Lord. Oh, okay.
She said, "Oh me."
Oh, me. Okay. She's probably said that a lot over 50 years. Any other praises?
You don't need to get into it.
I'm just trying not to. Just pointing out the obvious. Anybody else with a praise? Yep. Yeah.
I just want to thank the Lord for a little bit of warmer weather, and hope it lasts. It's just, some of us, it's been freezing, and so it's a blessing to have some sunshine and some warmth.
It's amazing in Georgia, you're scrambling for towels to wrap your spigots, and then 2 days later it's 73 degrees outside, you know. That's just Georgia. Anyone else? Praises. We won't belabor it. Hey, Miss Kathy?
Just praising the Lord for his faithfulness through the years, and when it all started, of course, when we got married in 74, but, 2 years, 1980 was, the Lord saved me. 2 years later, prayed and asked the Lord to save David, and he, through many things that happened, brought him to his knees out on 247. If you haven't heard that testimony, you ought to let him share it with you sometime. But just praising the Lord tonight because of his goodness.
Amen to that. Anybody else? Brother David? Yeah, just everybody. We got people listening online too, so they can hear these things.
My son is back from Iraq. He's been working as a security guard at the embassy, not military anymore, but on the news you keep hearing about, another missile attack in Iraq on the compound. And I think, well, he's okay. So praising God for that.
Yeah, amen. It's wonderful. All right. Remember any others, you can feel free to share it when we do prayer requests, but we'll keep on rolling. If you'd open up to Luke 24. Luke 24. As we get turning there, may end up being we'll see. I'll say it might be a short lesson, but we'll just see how it goes. But because I want to ask you to think about a couple things. So as we turn to Luke 24, I want you to think about stuff that you have come across in life that seemed to be one thing, but then once you actually got it, it was something totally different. And I want to ask you to give any examples or whatnot, but we can probably all think of something that we found on the internet to purchase. And you bought it, and the reviews were great. It looked like this, and you get it in. Like I bought a jacket one time. I liked the jacket well enough, but the zipper on it was extremely shiny, extremely bright silver. So the jacket was really nice, and you can't tell the shininess of a zipper in pictures on the internet, but it was pretty inexpensive. But you don't wear a jacket like that when you have friends like Joel Sizemore, because I can still remember. He would point it out every time. I mean, I wore it to Charles. I can still remember where I was standing in the foyer wearing it one time when he made fun of me. I mean, at church, for goodness sake, but we know that's the kind of person Joel is. But things like that. I mean, again, you thought it was something, and then you get it, and it's very different. And don't be thinking, your wife or your husband. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about possessions. Just surprises, because the presentation was not what it turned out to be. And with that in mind, I got a couple of photos I want to show you. So the first one is, I'm sure, very recognizable for all of us. It is the most, I forget the artist's name, I won't try to mess it up, but the painting was done, I think, in 41, and I think it's just called Jesus the Christ. And it's the most widely distributed, or the most printed. So you're talking about everything from bookmarks to, and family Bibles often have this picture in the front of it. You may have a family Bible that has one in the front of it, or just your standard Bible, but typically older Bibles, 40 plus years ago, printed with this image in it. You probably have, lamp shades with this on. I mean, all kinds of products have had the image of what folks are assuming would be claiming is Jesus on it. Something like 500 million times this image has been printed out from whatever estimations I had looked up. But by far, the most recognizable and the most widely distributed. But one really just major thing, one major issue, especially if you were to show this picture to someone walking the streets of Jerusalem at Jesus' time. Well, first it'd be odd that you have a picture that looks like this that you're showing to them. But they would say something is very unusual about this depiction of who you say Jesus is. And what's that main thing? Anglo. Yeah, it's his skin tone. It's his facial structure. One, just this perfect looking hair and all that. But it's the skin. He looks European in this picture. Obviously European. So apparently back in about 20-something years ago, this group of researchers went on this hunt to essentially find out, and they unearthed skulls and things from the time period when Jesus walked this earth to try to see what is a more realistic depiction of what a Middle Eastern man would have looked like at that time frame. And this next picture is closer, much more likely to be similar. Of course, not saying that this is a picture of Jesus. Not saying the other one isn't either. Neither one of these are. But this would be much more similar, or would be much more likely to have similarities, because this is what they say the average male from that area looked like. And this is from them going to Jerusalem and the surrounding areas and unearthing these skulls, and with forensics and stuff, you see it on TV enough, they can sort of say here's what the person would look like. So you can take those or move along on the slides now. But so I'm just doing that to show you to think about Jesus. I know we're not going to talk about pictures of Jesus, one and it's a whole other message or lesson about having depictions of Jesus anyway. There's a whole philosophy behind even that, presenting an image of Jesus in a church setting or even in your home. Of course, very common among Catholic traditions to have all these relics all over. Not here to talk about pictures. We are here to talk about what we think and who we think, what we think he did and does and is doing, and who we think he is in reference to Jesus. The pictures just kind of give us a starting point, like this image that so many have taken. And maybe when you saw that picture, it was just instantly. You might have remembered it was hanging on the wall in your home or your grandparents' home or your family, your parents' home growing up. You might have remembered opening it in that big family Bible and seeing it there. And you just see that and think, oh, there's Jesus. And if anybody asked you, you'd say, oh, is that an actual photograph? And of course, we would all say, well, no. But our opinion of his physical characteristics is skewed by what we've been presented all of our lives. And the same can be true about who he was and what he did and what he said and how it's been characterized to us through even preaching, through Bible studies, through our personal reading. That's something you see on TV, a book you read, whatever. So no, in the short time we have, we can't go through and just have a concise layout of, all right, here's who Jesus is. You can't sum Jesus up in 20 minutes or whatever we've got. But I'm going to take a story here in Luke 24. It's just a short account. I think if I say the road to Emmaus, we would probably all have some recognition of it, But if I asked you to tell me the Luke account of the road to Emmaus, I think most of us have a hard time kind of, okay, well, who was in that? What happened? What was said? So just want to look at that here for a little bit this evening. But if you really let who Jesus is sink in, if you could really understand who he is, it would just shatter everything. I mean, your life would be overwhelmed as we really consider who he is versus how he is often depicted. Again, using those pictures as kind of our reference point, and just how different those two pictures were for who people are saying is the same, has similarities to the same man, and just how different they are. Let's just read this here, not reading the whole chapter, just reading through the story, the road to Emmaus. So verse number 1 of Luke 24 says, "But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they went to the tomb, taking the spices they had prepared, and they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. But when they went in, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. While they were perplexed about this, behold, 2 men stood by them in dazzling apparel. And as they were frightened and bowed their faces to the ground, the men said to them, 'Why do you seek the living among the dead? He is not here, but is risen. Remember how he told you, while he was still in Galilee, that the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and on the 3rd day rise.' And they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all these things to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary the mother of James and the other women with them who told these things to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter rose and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen cloths by themselves, and he went home marveling at what had happened." So we have the resurrection, we have the empty tomb, we have witnesses, but it's a very uncertain time. I mean, imagine, so don't complete the story in your head. Read the story up to here and think, you as a follower of Jesus, what would you be thinking right now with the accounts that are coming in? Maybe you're one who has not gone to the tomb to see it for yourself, or maybe you have, and it's, like Peter, he's marveling, saw the claws by themselves. What's all going through his mind? But then we have the road to Emmaus. So Emmaus is about 1 day's journey from Jerusalem. We've got these people, it says that very day, 2 of them were going to a village named Emmaus. It says about 7 miles from Jerusalem. Verse 14 says, "And they were talking with each other about all these things that had happened." So again, what would you be talking about? And how complex would that conversation be? You've sold your possessions. You have spent, because it says 2 of them, 2 of the disciples, 2 of the close followers. They spent all this time following him around. You thought he was the Messiah. You went to Jerusalem with him for the Passover, and you're expecting this massive weekend. It's the Passover celebration, remembrance, and the Messiah is supposed to come and do some certain things in your mind. Jesus himself said, "The kingdom is here." So a follower at that time under this Roman oppression, you'd have thought, okay, this is going to be a big couple of days. We're following him in there. We're going with him. He says the kingdom is at hand. We're about to see him take up this earthly throne and overthrow these Romans. But instead, again, put yourself in their shoes. That's what you're expecting. Your expectation of who Jesus is. And then what do you get? He's arrested and he's crucified. So none of this fits your categories of what was supposed to happen and who he was supposed to be. When I showed you that second picture of a Middle Eastern man at that time, I unless you've seen that before and this is all old news to you, that does not fit the depictions of what probably most of us have seen our entire lives of who Jesus is. For these followers of Jesus Christ walking side by side with him, they're going through the same turmoil, the same realization that something isn't matching up. But then you hear, again, this conversation. Man, if you can just have a transcript of what these two people talked about. The conversation about the tomb being empty. I mean, they would have heard all this before they left. But what else do you do? You followed him into Jerusalem. He's clearly been killed on the cross and buried. Then you don't know what to think about the resurrection part. And so what else do you do but go home? These are people who traveled back. They were going back home. They're not going to stay in Jerusalem. For one, their Messiah is gone. So Jesus' death was shattering for most of the disciples, even though he had tried to tell them what was going to happen. They had a bunch of assumptions, though. All these things, all these ways that you kind of, play with who Jesus is in their minds. Again, we do the same thing. Our expectations, our assumptions. He couldn't possibly do that or say that. Well, no, he did because it's in the Word. But if we're not following the Word closely, we don't really know who Jesus is. So when he ended up on the cross, all of it fell apart because their assumptions were not lining up with what he had actually told them. So these two people are walking. They're talking about their shattered hopes. And then let's keep reading. Verse 15. While they were talking and discussing together, Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What is this conversation that you are holding with each other as you walk?" And they stood still, looking sad. Of course they're sad. We've just talked about it. We know why they're sad and just how deep the hurt must be. But who shows up but Jesus himself? They're talking to him, but they don't know who he is. They can see, but yet they can't see. They're walking with Jesus, but they can't see the person they're walking with. Jesus asks what they're talking about. It says there, what I just read in verse 17, when he asked that, they stood still. Their faces are downcast. It says there in verse 18, one of them named Cleopas. It mentions the one. It doesn't specifically here say the name of the second one. There's all kinds of controversy or discussion about who the other person is. It could have been, this could be the same person as Clopas. It could be Clopas' wife. I think it's in Matthew where it mentions Clopas' wife was at the cross. So maybe, but it's just, we just don't know. It doesn't name the other person. So verse 18, though, it says, one of them named Cleopas answered him, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" And of course, there's irony throughout all of this. Because not only does he know what happens, he is what happened. And they're talking to him dumbfounded. Like, wow, have you been under a rock all this time? But of course he knows everything. Then, in verse 19, he's you could say playing along, I guess. He's doing it for an ultimate purpose, of course, ultimately for his glory. And he said to them, "What things?" And they said to him, "Concerning Jesus of Nazareth, a man who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and rulers delivered him up to be condemned to death and crucified him." So they explain who he is. But, verse 21, but we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the third day since these things happened. So to them, as we read this, we already know that the crucifixion was a victory. So make it fresh to yourself. Put yourself in their shoes. The crucifixion to these two was a defeat. To these followers of Jesus, the crucifixion was a defeat. It shattered everything. But all the language here is so loaded. How it's talking about redemption, about he was going to come and do these things in 21, redeem Israel. Can we think about the word redemption? We don't use that word nowadays like it's being meant to be used here. We think about, what do you redeem? A coupon? You redeem some tickets at the arcade to go get your prize. That's kind of how we often think of redemption. But the way it's being used in the Bible is it's specific to say that something terrible has been turned into something beautiful. So they're supposed to, Jesus, the Messiah, was supposed to redeem Israel, take something terrible, the persecution under the heavy hand of the Romans, and make it something beautiful. Redeem his people in that way. And where does the word redemption appear for the first time in the Bible? Anybody want to guess? Not in Genesis, but in the next book, in Exodus. Exodus 6. I'm going to turn there. You can if you want to, but if not, I'll just read it for you. Exodus 6. First time we see that word in the Bible. Just a couple verses here. Exodus 6, 5 through 7. Moreover, I have heard the groaning of the people of Israel, whom the Egyptians hold as slaves, and I have remembered my covenant. Say therefore to the people of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burden of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from slavery to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great acts of judgment. I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who has brought you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. So think about God promising redemption, promising deliverance through Moses. Sure enough, that's what happens. They're liberated from the hands of Pharaoh, and they are redeemed from that situation. But these people, these two on the road to Emmaus, do not think redemption has happened. Of course, Jesus knows that it's happened. He knows there is victory at the cross. But redemption does not mean, it has no meaning here for them. But when you take that word in light of what it would have meant to them, thinking all the way back to the Exodus account, and for a Jew at the time of Passover to be thinking about redemption that they were hoping for as they went into Passover, this Passover weekend, these celebrations, and you go from up here in your expectations all the way down, like you couldn't go any lower. I mean, the leader of this rebellion they were thinking, this revolt they were thinking, this overthrow, has been killed. So it's very loaded. We got to look deeper than just what we see here and make these connections, hyperlink it back to the Old Testament. So in Jesus' day, you think back to Moses, you have these oppressors. Pharaoh, the Pharaoh figure would be Caesar Augustus. And then he had his little crony, Pilate. If Jesus was going to redeem, both of those guys should have been stomped. All those Romans should have been taken out. And at Passover too, they'd be retelling the Exodus story this whole week. It'd be fresh on their heads about what God did in the Passover to spare the Jews and deliver them out of the hands of Pharaoh. And just all that build up, and then it's squashed. And that's where these two people are. That's why they're downtrodden. That's why their heads are down. They were looking for a climax. The story would be on their mind. It's hard to not blame them, really, for how they feel. So they're going to Emmaus. Typically in the Bible, and it's a shame, right? Like I just said a minute ago about how it'd be great if we had a transcript of their dialogue on the way. What were they really saying? That'd be really amazing to see. But when you do get a piece of detail, and for instance, the physical details of Jesus, we don't have. We have kind of general ideas, but as far as what the shape of his nose was, what his eyes, or whatever, the size of his ears. We don't have all of that. But when a detail is given, you really need to pay attention to it. So Emmaus, got to look deeper. When I say to you, I'm going to go visit Pearl Harbor. Okay, in this country, with our history, you would not think, oh, he's going for a vacation, and it was probably a pretty nice looking place, most of the year. No, you would say he's going to look at where the bombing took place, and look at some of the historical artifacts and monuments and things, and honor American heroes who were lost that day. If I told you I was going to Gettysburg, same thing. You would say, oh, he's traveling up north to just take some time, just with the family, probably find a nice coffee shop to sit around in, read a book or something. No, if I'm going to Gettysburg, I'm going to, again, look at historical artifacts from the Civil War, try to understand our history better and be a better person and a better American in the process, right? Like, it would have been the same here. When Luke is saying the road to Emmaus, it'd be like saying one of those names, because there was a great battle that had taken place 150 years before in Emmaus. So won't give a history of it because doesn't really matter at the moment. But if you want to look it up later, you may have heard of the Maccabean revolt, led by Judas Maccabeus, and it was a revolt by Jews against the ruling authority, the Syrians. And so there was hatred 150 years ago. There was hatred at that moment right then under the Roman rule. There were sides, there were lines drawn. Think about right now in our political climate. I mean, it's always bad, but especially when it's election time, and we're talking about how much the other person is awful. And if you're with that other person, you're awful too. You know, it's very set. I mean, you're either on one side of the fence or the other. You can't possibly be someone who can understand both or work with both. I mean, you can't associate with a certain political figure because then people make assumptions about who you are just because you say you're supporting that person. So you're sometimes hesitant to even say, hey, I'll vote for this person this election. I mean, because it's just how we do it. It's much easier to do it that way. Humans, it's much, much simpler. Instead of making it complex and thinking I'm in a room with a bunch of people who have these complex issues and I got to work with each one and try to understand their position. No, it's a lot easier to just say, well, half that side is Democrat, this half is Republican, or whatever, however you split them up. And then you can draw the lines and get rid of the people you don't like. And that's just what we probably all do, or at least we struggle with doing. But mentioning Emmaus, just as sensitive as mentioning something like Gettysburg or mentioning Pearl Harbor in this context. So Luke 6, again, you can turn there if you want. I'm just going to read a couple of verses, but if you want to flip back and follow with me, that's fine. But Luke 6, verse 27, this is what Jesus said while he was walking the earth before the crucifixion. He said, But I say to you who hear, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. To one who strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from one who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either. Give to everyone who begs from you, and from one who takes away your goods, do not demand them back. And as you wish that others would do to you, do so to them. If you love those who love you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. And if you lend to those from whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to get back the same amount. But love your enemies and do good and lend, expecting nothing in return. And your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the evil. Be merciful, even as your Father is merciful. So this Jesus, walking with them, those are the kind of things that he said. He's talking to two people who have the flesh is hurting, right? And they have these expectations against people that they hate, who they think hate them. I'm sure most or all, or probably did. There was a lot of hatred going both ways. But the words out of Jesus' mouth were different. And what he came saying was different than what they were feeling. It contradicted the hardship that they were having. And I'll explain that a little bit better as we close. Jesus knew what it meant to be a human trying to follow God. He felt what we feel. He became personal. We talked about that Sunday night. But he knows that the way that evil gets defeated is by doing good and having sacrificial love. All these things that are not things you think would defeat evil. He said that this is the kind of life that he brings. That example. And sure enough, how did he conquer and defeat evil? It was by turning the other cheek and by letting evil defeat him. He lived that out in every possible way. But he knew that he was defeating evil by being crucified. So he took the cup, and he took the bread, that Passover meal, I mean, these are symbols of the Exodus story. Think about the blood. Think about his body. Think about sacrifice. Laying it up as an offering. He pointed them to his broken body and his shed blood too. So when you think back to the story that would be so pressing on their heads, the Passover story, in the mind of the Jew, and if it were you too, you'd be thinking, I mean, who are you looking for out of the Passover story to come into that time period and overthrow the Romans? Well, we need another Moses, because that's what Moses did, right? He stepped in, the power of God working through him, giving him this word, leading him, boldly going before God, before Pharaoh. I mean, there were miracles involved, these plagues involved, and then Moses led these people out. That's who you're looking for. Where's our Moses? Well, out of the Passover story, Jesus didn't come as a Moses character. He came as the Passover lamb that was sacrificed to save the Jews who would very soon walk out of Egypt. It's just a total shift, a total change of expectation. Again, you can see how hard this must be for these people. But the good news, it's going to sort of turn around for them. So let's finish reading this here. So verse 22, moreover, some women of our company amazed us. They were at the tomb early in the morning, and when they did not find his body, they came back saying that they had even seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but him they did not see. And he said to them, O foolish ones and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Was it not necessary that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory? And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. So they drew near to the village to which they were going. So they're still walking along, still talking. Still not a full realization. He acted as if he were going farther, but they urged him strongly, saying, Stay with us, for it is toward evening, and the day is now far spent. So he went in to stay with them. When he was at table with them, he took the bread and blessed and broke it and gave it to them, and their eyes were opened. After what? After he took the bread and the drink. He was a guest in this home, but he takes the meal. And clearly, when did he do this last time? Before he was crucified. Breaking the bread, giving it to them, blessing it. Their eyes were opened in verse 31, and they recognized him. And he vanished from their sight. Goodness. On the same verse. Their eyes get opened, and then he is gone. And I just love this line. They said to each other, Did not our hearts burn within us while he talked to us on the road, and while he opened to us the scriptures? So, and it said that, in verse 27, he's interpreting all these things, he's laying it all out. I mean, this is a serious conversation. It's just kind of beautiful that Jesus was sort of acting like he was going on, and then they called him back, and, okay, I'll come with you. And there's some playfulness there. There's a love there. But sure enough, their eyes were opened. And for sake of time, we'll go ahead and sort of wrap up here. But just the concept of who Jesus was and how different our feelings want to make him, how different we want the story to be because we don't like the way things are sometimes, the way we treat what he has said, we can manipulate so badly. But do we have a clear picture of who Jesus is? Are our eyes opened fully to who he is? Are we open to truth? Are we reading the word? Are we praying that God would show himself and make himself real to us? Because we obviously want to see the real Jesus. But the enemy is not man. It is not these sides. The enemy was evil itself. And we can learn some real important lessons for ourselves when we think about who we set up as our enemy. The person is not the aim. What are we supposed to do to our enemies? Basically allow them to strike us back, allow them to, they can kill us. Well, if Jesus didn't die on the cross and rise from the dead and is everything he says he is, well, that makes no sense at all, because the enemy would kill us and then we're toast. But no, the greater good is pursuing of good, pursuing of righteousness. And if in the process of sharing Jesus and pursuing good, we are killed, we are hurt, we are maimed, there's an eternal weight of glory that's waiting for us. So there's no level of punishment that the world can inflict on us that outshines the glory that's to come. And Jesus embodied that perfectly, as we know. All right. Well, let's move on to our prayer request time. Still have plenty of time for it, but we'll go ahead and exit the live stream.